Hi, I'm Isaac and I do content and marketing at Lovable. And in this video, we're going to be explaining how you can market your app. I've interviewed a lot of successful founders. And of course, at Lovable, we have seen massive growth. And I think internally, we have learned a lot of stuff about marketing through this growth and the various things we're doing. And then I've also built apps in the past and gotten revenue and so on. I have a lot of knowledge to share on this topic, and I think it would be very valuable for all of the builders out there, especially people building with Lovable and they may have just finished their product, but they're now wondering, how do I actually get customers? So that is what I will try to cover now. So I prepared this little Figma board with some nice Lovable graphics. But essentially, let's imagine that you have just finished building your app and you're now wondering how to acquire customers. Let's start off over here. So the first kind of basic marketing strategy that everyone kind of intuits, I guess, is just to ask people around you, kind of direct sales. And this is what people, of course, did back in the days when you had created something. You would, go to your tribe and walk up to them and be like, I made this stick. Do you wanna buy it or trade for it? I guess. But as we humans evolved, greater degrees of distribution came to existence. But this kind of direct sales strategy is still kind of effective depending on which product you're selling. So if you're selling a high ticket item, something which is worth a lot of money, then like doing cold calling, for example, where you just like find a company's number and you call them up and you try to sell it, it could still work, right? It could still work for local businesses and so on. I think it's more difficult to do with big companies because it's so much hierarchy that it's almost unprofessional in some sense to just call them up and sell to them. But then we also have things like direct email. You can email people, and I would say emailing is still an effective option. And then you can do door to door. Of course, that's probably also only effective for local businesses. Maybe if you're doing some sort of SaaS for local, maybe restaurants, then it can be pretty effective to do door-to-door knocking. But if it's a big company that you're selling to, maybe you're selling to SaaS companies, then it's probably not the most effective method. And you can also use like Instagram DMs, LinkedIn DMs, XDMs, and using social media can be very effective because you can filter out or you can find companies relevant to your particular product. So let's say you're selling some sort of marketing analysis tool. So you're helping consumer companies analyze their ads, for example, to optimize them. Then you can try to reach out to some of these companies through Instagram, LinkedIn. Maybe you can email them. You should probably create like an Excel spreadsheet. There's this other company called Clay AI, which is really cool. It's like Excel, but it's AI enhanced. You can connect it up to N8N. You can do all sorts of automations to enrich data. So if you have their email or if you have their names, you can enrich the email, gather the email based on the previous information. So this can be effective for high ticket companies if you're selling a product to other companies and they're willing to pay a lot of money. But if you have a consumer app, like I always use the example of Cal AI because it's a easy understandable app. It's this app where you can scan food and it tells you how much calories using AI there is in the food. If you have an app like that, it's going to be super ineffective to just DM people. That's not going to be the method you want to employ on your marketing strategy. And I would say at Lovable, we have a mix of builders. We have some building in the B2B space and some in the B2C space. But in the B2B space, you definitely need some sort of sales pipeline because that's how you're going to get your customers. So you should really research how you can effectivize this, which tools you can use to find the right leads, and how you can really optimize this. And Clay is one of my suggestions for that. And you also need to make sure that you're good at sales generally, doing the sales calls, and you need to be charismatic and good at doing sales. But don't fall into any of the get rich quick courses and stuff on this though. Basically, that's how you would do B2B, sell to businesses. You would just do direct sales. But if you are a consumer brand, then you probably want to take other methods, other channels. So you can do organic content. And this is actually what I would recommend for a lot of indie builders, indie hackers, people who have just bootstrapped their things, so they haven't taken any outside investments, and the budget is limited, and they can't spend on ads, they can't spend on influencer marketing, but what they can do is make organic content about their product, and then they can try to optimize it for the algorithm in which they will post the video or the content on, if that's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. And then essentially these platforms will organically generate impressions for the company that you're building. In my opinion, all of these platforms have their own kind of taste to them. So I would say that if you're building a consumer app and you just want to go viral, you just want to get as much reach as possible organically, then TikTok is a great way of doing that. And of course, you can cross post on Instagram and YouTube when it comes to these TikTok videos, shorts. And if you go viral on TikTok, then you can get a lot of customers if you show the product clearly within the video. And going viral on TikTok is essentially only about optimizing watch time and also engagement. Essentially, all of these platforms have their own algorithm, which they use to dictate who is shown what content. And you need to understand that algorithm and the taste of the platform to be able to perform well. And the benefits of doing organic content is, of course, that the cost can be very low. You essentially just need to record content, and you can do that with your iPhone. And it starts to compound. So if you have, for example, 100,000 followers on TikTok and you get like 200,000 views on each video, which is very good, then you can just continue growing that channel and the costs will stay the same, but the views will increase. So it's very beneficial in that sense and can be a very good source. But it's a lot of time, though. It's a lot of time effort because you have to spend time on making these videos. You have to create new video concepts and ideas, and it can be a lot of time. But if you're just one person and you don't have a large budget, it can be an effective method of gaining your first couple of hundred customers. Now, for these other platforms, let's say YouTube, I would say that the competition is way harder. So YouTube has a lot of high quality content, and to be able to compete against that, you also have to produce very high quality content in most of the cases, or very authentic content, which is also an angle which you can take. But I would use YouTube to educate your audience. That's also another option. You can use these platforms not only to get reach, but also to educate people. So let's say your product is pretty complicated to use. Of course, that's not perfect, but some products are. Then you can use YouTube to educate your audience on that product. And you can also educate people within the space that your product is in, and you can kind of become an authority in the space and in some ways be your own sponsor, which can be a very effective method. And there are various brands doing this, and I can pop some of them up on screen as well. And I think that's a kind of new strategy emerging that's going to become more and more popular over time. And then, of course, LinkedIn, X, another great sources to do organic content. You probably want to post everything you do on LinkedIn and X. It's very easily. Prepare a viral tweet. And I would say spend a lot of time on this, though. A lot of people, they just post stuff, but it's sort of an art to create viral LinkedIn and tweets. And you should study the algorithms of those platforms as well, not only these video platforms. Those are some options, but then you also have SEO and blog articles. So SEO is another method. It essentially means search engine optimization, and it's also within this kind of organic category where you create organic content on your website that ranks in search. You can in some ways do SEO in Google App Store and Play Store as well. But you're trying to include certain keywords within your website repeatedly to try to get Google and other search engines to index your website highly for those keyword searches so people can visit it. And throughout time, there have been various hacks which you can do to kind of rank. Right now, these algorithms are very smart. So in some ways, I would say that SEO is a bit overrated. I would say it's more about if you have a great product and people are staying on your website for a long time, similar to how someone would watch a video for a long time, Google will see that time spent on the website and will assume that the user is satisfied, and that will increase your ranking. So I would say that make sure that you have all of the basics down when it comes to SEO. You have the metadata, and you have no problems with your website. But then I would say just focus on these other channels. If you have the time and the budget to write articles and stuff, that could also be a good idea. I mean, because articles also help with SEO, right? If you have a website like Lovable, we have a slash blog, I believe, where we write blogs, and these blogs can sometimes rank in search, which means that someone may visit the blog and then they might learn about Lovable and try out Lovable. So it can be an effective method, but it's also something I would say is secondary compared to social media, in my opinion. And then if you're doing organic content, but you want to scale it up further, right? Because you can only reach a set amount of people with your own organic videos, then you should probably try out influencer marketing or maybe paid marketing. But let's start off with influencer marketing. So what influencer marketing means is that you're paying other creators who have a following and get views on their stuff to create videos which include your product. So of course, most people have probably heard of this. If if you've been on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, you've probably seen people doing sponsored integrations where they stop the video and they say this video is sponsored by X, and then they explain their product quickly, essentially just like a YouTube ad, but it's not going through Google. Instead, it's going through the creator and the company directly. By having this relationship, creator to company, in some ways, it's harder to do at scale than paid marketing because you have to reach out to these creators manually. You have to get their emails. In some sense, it becomes almost like a sales funnel where you have to, reach out to these people, create a clay table or an Excel table, and email them and negotiate with them to make sure that you're getting good prices. And I would say that a lot of large companies, they tend to do influencer marketing incorrectly because they assume that just because a creator has a lot of followers, that their audience is engaged. Maybe they don't even get that many views on their content, and maybe their audience just doesn't convert well. So when it comes to influencer marketing, I highly suggest not trying to automate it too much in the beginning because you won't know what you're looking for. And I highly suggest not outsourcing it. And I highly suggest being on hands and getting an intuition for which channels works and for how many views leads to a conversion. So you can calculate kind of, okay, if I pay this person this much, will it be worth it for me? Will I actually make a profit on that? So you have to know all of these numbers to be able to scale it up. And then once you have these numbers, you can just, try to automate it. You can try to scale it up using various methods. But it's still a very new space, and you still have to, in some ways, have a taste for which audience would be interested in your product, which I think a lot of people already have. And when it comes to influencer marketing, there are different deals which you can do. You can try to do, and of course that's the most common. You just do a flat price. So you just tell the influencer, we're gonna pay you this much for a video, and you give them the draft, the script, and you approve it. But then you can also do CPM-based payments. So CPM means cost per 1,000 views in this case. Cost per 1,000 views, you can pay the creator for every 1,000 views, maybe like $2. That's a very good CPM. From the company's perspective, it's very low. But most influencers, most creators, they won't agree to a CPM-based payment because it's very risky for them. And usually it's very, very preferable for the company and not so much for the influencer. But of course, if you can do CPM, that would be great, given that the CPM is low enough for you to be profitable. Now, there are some other things you can do as well. You can do affiliate programs where you give the creator a payment based on how many conversions they get. This is even harder to get the creator to agree on, to be paid solely based on conversions, because it's your product. I mean, it's not the creator's product. The creator can't guarantee that the audience is going to be interested in it. But you can still use it as some sort of bonus or reward to align incentives, which is really important. Then you can also do a monthly retainer. So you just batch multiple videos together and you pay them month on month. And you may also want to figure out, okay, is the creator going to do a dedicated video on my content, or is the creator going to do an integration with my content? Of course, the dedicated video in some sense is more organic, but of course, most channels may not be able to do that because most channels won't have a great enough overlap within your niche to be able to make a dedicated video on your particular product. I mean, that's very uncommon. But for instance, on Lovable, you can make a dedicated tutorial on Lovable. And that would be an example of a dedicated video where a tech channel might actually make, and it would make sense for them to make that. Now, another thing to consider is usage rights when making these sponsorships, which essentially allows you to run ads on the videos, which can be interesting, and I will explore that later, but that's something you have to have in the contract when talking with the influencer. And then what you can also do is that you can do UGC, which means user-generated content. And in some sense, the definition here kind of means the same as creator marketing, but the difference, the core difference is that creators already have a following and the views, while UGC content, it's just random people on the internet creating videos about your product. And this was actually not a thing before, I would say, TikTok and Instagram. or actually before TikTok, because on YouTube you kind of need a following almost. Of course, now all platforms are moving into the kind of TikTok direction, but it's way harder for some random person to go viral on YouTube than it is for them to go viral on TikTok. So TikTok's algorithm is way more kind of fine with random content going viral, if I put it that way. And that means that you can do these kind of large scale campaigns where you have a bunch of people who don't necessarily have a bunch of followers. It could just be average people with zero followers, but they create content on the product. And because of the TikTok algorithm, one of these videos out of 30 might get a lot of traction. So this is, of course, very hard to manage. So in these cases, I would recommend working with an agency to have them manage this operation of creators creating content at mass scale for you. And this is a very, new technique. And when it comes to marketing and I guess business in general, capitalism, if you can find one of these edges that a lot of people aren't doing, which UGC might be one of them, then you can get an edge on the market and you can actually be more profitable by paying less for more views. So this is something worth exploring. Now let's move over to paid marketing. So once you have these creatives in place, maybe you have some organic content, maybe you have some influencer marketing content, and you have usage rights, then you can take those videos and you can run them as paid advertising. And of course, that's the business model of all of these social media platforms. They are essentially selling ad slots and selling user data for companies to be able to market on them. So the benefits of doing paid marketing is control, essentially. You get to control which videos gets more views because you're able to just put money into the videos you want to show to more people. And you can also track more easily. You can see who converts because you will have a link pop up, and you can see more data on the audiences, and you can really fine tune how you want to run the show. Because of that, you can see, okay, how much does it actually cost to acquire a customer through this ad, and you can test various ads, and you can actually have a very nice dynamic between organic influencer marketing and paid marketing, where you can upload content, you can test it as paid, you can try to see the conversion rate, and then you can learn from the results of paid marketing and educate your influencer marketing. And then you can, of course, use those influencer clips in your paid marketing. So it's something that all companies should try, and it can give them a lot of information. But because paid marketing is so systematized and organized, it's almost like a stock market, a digital stock market where everyone is bidding. So the prices are going to be more effective than on some of these more chaotic sources of marketing, which means that if you have a very basic product that doesn't have that wow effect to it, then it can be very hard to get good returns on paid marketing. So it's very important to have a viral kind of product that people want to watch and stay watching, and have good creatives. And creatives is just pieces of content that you can run ads on, because these platforms have a kind of a dilemma. They want to be able to satisfy viewers and give them entertaining content, but they also want to satisfy companies paying for their ads to disrupt the viewer. So what these platforms want, these social media brands, they want the ads to not feel as disruptive to the viewer. The way of doing that is just checking how long does the viewer actually watch the ad, how entertaining is the ad itself. And that's why we're now beginning to see more companies just using organic content as ads instead of creating these dedicated ads. In my opinion, that is what I'm seeing, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's also kind of what we're trying out at Lovable. And yeah, it's just a good strategy, I think, overall. But of course, with ads, you can A/B test. You have a fast feedback loop. You have clear ROI. You can run ads on App Store as well, Google Ads, Play Store, and all of these other channels. And I would recommend exploring some of these new channels like X, maybe YouTube. All of these, of course, YouTube is not new, but like, yeah, X and LinkedIn and all of these new markets, because they won't actually be saturated in the same way. Their markets won't be effective. So if you're a small company just trying to gain an edge and become profitable, then it can be a good idea to try some of these more weird marketing channels. But of course, you can't do everything at once, and I don't think you should. Even large companies, I don't think should overextend themselves. If you find if you can use the I would say in the beginning, just try to reason through which platform would make the most sense for your brand and would get the highest return, and then give it a try, give some other platforms a try, and just pick the one which you're getting the best return on, and just double down on that. We also have this thing called guerrilla marketing. But what guerrilla marketing means is that you're doing these kind of one-time stunts or these launches or these unconventional ways of marketing your products, and you're trying to get attention through these means. So almost all companies are doing some sort of guerrilla marketing in various ways. I would say that even making like a launch video and posting it on X and LinkedIn, or maybe posting a meme, or maybe commenting on someone's post, all of that is within this kind of category of guerrilla marketing. It's something you can't really systematize in the same ways as you can systematize these other things. And it kind of involves a lot of creativity, and you can do it in a very low cost way. You can also do it in a very high cost way. In some sense, leaving a comment on Twitter is guerrilla marketing, and also buying a billboard or sending something to space is guerrilla marketing. For example, when Elon Musk sent up his Tesla car on his SpaceX rocket, that's kind of guerrilla marketing. He's doing something unique and that's very like unconventional, but got a lot of attention. And some platforms which you can use for this is of course the basic social media apps. They're they're almost on all of these slides because they're so common, and that's essentially where information is spread nowadays. But then you also have like Reddit, Product Hunt, maybe Hacker News can also be one to try. But generally, I think I'm not too experienced with Reddit. I think it can work, but I think it's a bit difficult because of moderation and stuff. You know, in some sense, you would think that you can just go to the most relevant Reddit server and use post, but you have to do it very suddenly. You can't just advertise your product directly because that will seem very off. And that's kind of the same for all of these channels. If you're too pointy in your advertising, then that can actually be not so effective, because then people won't want to watch it because they know it's an ad. And Product Hunt is another platform. I highly recommend Product Hunt if you're creating any type of product software online. Then you should definitely launch on Product Hunt. Now I'm essentially doing a free ad for Product Hunt, but it's a good platform to gain momentum, gain an initial initial customer base. So highly recommend Product Hunt, and that's actually where Lovable began to get its first customers. It was from a Product Hunt launch. So highly recommend Product Hunt. And some other things which you can do is like use viral content, street campaign. I don't know. You can do all sorts of things, but I would say that X and LinkedIn are the kind of guerrilla marketing platforms right now, in my opinion. That's where you need your guerrilla team to be at. But either way, now we have an overview of all of these channels. So basically, if you're a small company, you're one man army or one woman army, then and you're building a consumer app, then do organic, scale it up, see how people react. You should probably also test your product with maybe family and friends, or maybe it's unrelated people. Then you can do some sales and direct outreach just to test it out. But really, if you're a consumer brand, you have to scale any of these. I would say that building in public is a great idea on X. A lot of companies are doing that, and they're not actually running any marketing campaigns at all except from posting on X and LinkedIn. And they're just nailing that and just gaining momentum from that. But I think one has to remember the kind of people at X and LinkedIn. It's gonna be like technical people a lot of the times, like programmers, people who are very good at things. Maybe that sounds weird, but I would say that if you're scrolling through X, you're gonna be in a particular niche. Maybe that's video creation, maybe that's programming, and you're gonna be interested in that niche to a high level. So if you're building a product for that niche, then X and LinkedIn can be very good for that. But then, of course, organic scale ads. If you're a large company, you should definitely be trying out paid marketing and influence marketing, in my opinion. But you have to make sure that you have good taste when it comes to influence marketing. You can't just start paying creators just because they have a high following count. So yeah, you have to be diligent when it comes to that. And yeah, organic can be a great way of building your brand. In some ways, all of these channels will lead to people visiting your website and your organic channels. So in some ways, you want your organic channels to function almost like a funnel. So here I built this little roadmap quickly of how you would kind of sequence these steps if you're building a consumer app. Because that is what I have the most experience with. But I also built one for a B2B app where you're selling to businesses. But let's start off with the consumer app. So the first step in building your company is to ask people and to see if your product is actually useful. Now, a great way of doing this could be to check if the product is useful for you. I mean, that's kind of how I see a lot of successful companies being built. They're solving their own problems, the founders. So that's a great way of doing it. But also checking with others. Don't be afraid to talk about your idea. So that's kind of the first step. Then you can build out the product and so on. And you can continuously talk with users while you're building it out. But then I would say also make sure that you have created the correct material to onboard users. Make sure that it's clear how to use your product within your product, and maybe create a basic tutorial video on how to use your product. And once you have that set up, you know that this is something people want, or at least you want it, you find it interesting, and you have the correct onboarding experience and resources to help get new customers, funnel in new customers, then you launch it. So then go on Product Hunt, go on X, LinkedIn, prepare a bunch of tweets, LinkedIn posts, and prepare a Product Hunt launch and launch it and schedule it. And you probably get a lot of customers from that, or not necessarily a lot of customers, but if your product is good, it can trigger a lot of momentum. And you can also schedule influencers and creators for this launch. If this is your first launch, and if you don't have a lot of money, then maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you're good with just doing it organically through LinkedIn and X instead of scheduling up a creator kind of schedule for the launch. But if you do have money, then screw it. Why not give it a try? Just make sure you're trying to track at least how much you're getting from it. And then experiment with various channels once you have launched. Try all of the marketing channels and see how much momentum you're getting, study them. And once you have experimented with them, you can try to build out kind of content engine, see how you can produce content at scales, if it's tweets, if it's TikTok videos, if it's YouTube videos, whatever is getting you the results and whatever you expect to get you results in the future. And then make sure to measure an attribute and just make sure that you know which channels are bringing in the most customers, not only views, but actually customers. And then just double down on whatever things work. If that's paid marketing, influence marketing, organic content, just double down on that and just keep the momentum alive. Another important thing that I talked about earlier, just share everything, every update that you're making, and make sure you're satisfying the community. Maybe make a Discord server, just update your product and share it. And this actually is related to something called product-led growth, which I am actually new to. It's a kind of new concept to me. But what it means is that you essentially see the product as a way of gaining new users as well. So not only satisfying current users or future users, but actually building the product in a way which leads to you acquiring new users. So it's kind of related to this guerrilla marketing category where you create creative and innovative ways of getting new users. Of course, social media platforms like Snapchat, Instagram, they have nailed this in some ways because they're just gathering so much information. They know who to recommend, who you can befriend, and how you can invite new people to the platform. But of course, this product-led growth can be done in a variety of ways. There's not like one thing which you add to your product, which leads to more customers, and it's kind of product to product. But there's a lot of cool things which you may expect to be maybe a gimmick, maybe useless, but can actually lead to a lot of growth. So, for example, one of the things we did at Lovable is that we launched Lovable Launch, which was kind of this platform similar to Product Hunt, where you can rank websites, but it's for Lovable websites. And that was kind of something that we just created like super quickly and launched, and we built it with Lovable. So yeah, I don't know, you can like do things like this. You can add more things to the product. One of the things we recently added was this thing right here. We have the kind of like how GitHub has it. You can see your streak and stuff like that. I mean, even showing products down here is also a kind of product-led growth thing that you can do just to bring in more customers, to keep your product alive, and you can post about it. And the post is kind of just as important as the feature itself in some ways, in some features. All right, but that's kind of the consumer app roadmap. And I would say that as your company grows, performance marketing is going to become more and more important because you want to nail it. And it's kind of hard to do in the beginning well, I would say. But that's going to become something you spend a lot of time doing. And then also influence marketing. And yeah, just scaling those things. Now, B2B. So let's say you have a company where you're actually selling to other companies, then your strategy is going to be way different. So firstly, also, I want to mention that a large consumer app might end up becoming a B2B company. So if you think of things such as Miro, Figma, even Lovable, we're selling to enterprises now. Most companies eventually, if they reach a certain scale, the majority of the revenue is actually coming from enterprises. So and that's something that's beginning to happen in Lovable right now. More and more enterprises are adapting our tool, and in a lot of cases, that changes how the product is developed. And I think a lot of companies make this mistake of not prioritizing their users, their consumer users, and instead just trying to prioritize their enterprise users. And I think you want to do both, of course. But in some sense, the consumer users came before the enterprise users. And if people start to dislike your product, then eventually it's just a question of time when enterprises will stop using your product, because you need champions at enterprises to advertise your product, to be like, I love this product, we should buy it in at our company so everyone can use it. That's kind of how the kind of modern method of acquiring enterprises right now goes, is that you lead with products and you improve the product, and then you try to build up this enterprise team while you're still prioritizing users. But of course, there can be a lot of steps required to actually make your product safe and enterprise friendly. And for those features, you may need like an engineer or a couple of engineers, or if you're a large company, multiple engineers, and that can take some focus. But you still want to satisfy the user. And I would say Microsoft, I don't know how well of an example it is, but I would say that they're kind of I don't know. They're making most of their money from enterprises, I think, with some of their softwares, and it kind of feels like everyone is just using Google Docs now. You know, who uses Microsoft Word anymore? It's just I don't know. Maybe I'm coping, but I feel like it's something that's happening to Microsoft, and of course, DocuSign or whatever. These people who sued a Lovable app, like they're also kind of falling in that category, I think. And a lot of these companies prioritizing sales, they're becoming slow, they're becoming bureaucratic, and they have lost that kind of fast-moving energy and caring about users. So let's move over to the enterprise strategy, which is not consumer-led. So this is actually a company which is only selling to companies. Essentially, that's their priority. In those cases, you want to start, of course, with validating your product, and you can do that with like test pilots where people try your product for free, enterprises, and you will of course have to adapt some sort of reach out strategies to these companies, but you can give them a test pilot, you can document everything, and I'm actually going to be a bit more diligent to read the description here. So offer your service for free or heavily discounted to a few early businesses. Focus on learning their pain points and refining your solution. Case studies from these pilots become your first sales assets. So that's correct. If you're running these test pilots, then it can be very good to document it, and you can use it as social proof, I guess. What some companies will do is that they will try to reach these very large brands that or other brands look up to. And if they have a positive review of your product, then that can make it way easier to sell to these other brands. So it can be worth getting these more credible logos on your website at the expense of charging less. It can definitely be a worth trade-off. Maybe even give it for free to get that review. Now, build credibility plus proof. So that is something that I talked about there. You want to be able to say something in these lines. We saved X company 30% on Y. If you're selling to a company, yes. But if you're selling to a non-profit, then no, they might have some other values. So you have to figure that out. So direct outreach. So you start the sales process here. You can leverage LinkedIn, cold email, how the industry communicates with each other. You have to kind of dive into the industry. You have to nail your ideal customer profile, who is actually, buying this product. How does the company look like? Where is it located? And then you have to experiment with the scalable acquisition channels, so LinkedIn ads and all of these stuff. Now, I'm not sure if you necessarily have to start running ads. It can be enough to just do outreach, I guess, in some ways, and maybe post organically. Of course, LinkedIn is going to be such a strong machine for advertising your product organically, if it's a B2B product, because essentially that's what LinkedIn is for. So I highly recommend going on LinkedIn and just posting your case studies and so on there. Now, build a repeatable, scalable engine. So this is kind of the pipeline. How do we onboard people? How do we gather leads? How do we sell them? How do we convert them? Usually, what almost all companies will do when buying a product is that they have a budget in place, and you have to figure out, where do I allocate this budget? And if you step in and you explain your product, and if you give them a test run, maybe for 2 months, depending on how large the company is, and then if they like it, then you can convert them to a yearly customer, or maybe for a 3-year deal. And essentially that should be your goal, right? Just, lock them in on a long contract. Expand accounts. So once you have a client, most of your revenue will come from expanding the clients which you already have, it seems like. Okay, so this slide might seem intuitive, and I'm not super experienced with this, but I think this makes a lot of sense, that if you already have these clients, a lot of your revenue will come from expanding on those clients, selling more stuff to them, upselling them, providing even more value. And you should always lead with that kind of value first approach. But that's essentially the next step. How do we actually provide more value to these companies and upsell them? So systematize and scale. I guess that is kind of a last piece of the puzzle. Is just, how do we scale all of this? How do we make sure that we can continue growing? And I think that when it comes to B2B stuff, also, I think a lot of the kind of guerrilla marketing things still apply. Like, you may want to create events stuff to invite companies. And I think stuff like that can really help when it comes to B2B things, as it's more about relationship building and less about like optimizing for the algorithm and stuff like that. Okay, and then I have some general tips right here. So for use marketing overall. So I have be on hands and gain an intuition. So this is very important, almost with all things in life, is that you want to kind of do it yourself and gain an intuition for it first, and then you can scale it up. Then YC also talks about this, like do things that don't scale, and this is kind of what they mean. This is the underlying lesson in some ways of that statement. Make sure that attribution is correct. So make sure that you sometimes, when it comes to paid marketing, of course, these platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, social media platforms, they want you to spend more on ads because that's how they make a profit. They take a cut. So they might over attribute your ads, saying that they performed better than they actually did. And it's kind of like a data scientist, I don't know, trick in some ways, that you're attributing a purchase to an ad when in actuality the customer might have done the purchase regardless if they saw the ad. So you need to know if the ad was the deciding factor for the purchase. And of course, this is a whole branch in itself, so you'll have to research that. But that's basically how it works. So you have to be very aware of that. You need to make sure that your ads do not cannibalize other sources of traffic, that it doesn't like take and eat up their customers. So yeah, that's very important. This is another important part. It's very important to know your customers and understand your markets, and that way you can, in some ways, maybe intuit or reason your way to the best channels to use. And then also, when it comes to marketing, is to think about it methodically. What the goals am I trying to reach, and which channels can I use to achieve those goals? And are those goals, do those goals make sense? So that's the question. What are the goals? And do they make sense? And what is the fastest and cheapest and most effective way to get to them? And in most cases, that's just like new customers, of course. But it can also be like, you also want to maximize lifetime value. Like, how do I get customers to stay, and so on. And then double down on what works. Try to reason from first principles. Don't just copy what others do or what is mainstream at the moment. So in some ways, there might be a meta, a popular method used by companies to market their product. Meta is kind of coming from the video game industry, but in some ways there is always a meta when it comes to marketing and other aspects of life, and you don't just want to copy what other people do. Of course, when it comes to meta, you probably do want to do what's meta, but you don't just want to copy things because other people do them. But of course, if there is a best strategy, you should do that strategy. But you shouldn't just do what other people do without actually reasoning if it actually works for your particular product. Creatives and videos is the pillar of marketing. So creatives just means videos, but it is the pillar of marketing. If you have great content, then that's gonna help you with performance marketing. It's gonna help you organically because the algorithm is gonna boost it. It's just gonna make things easier. So you need great content, and that's the case for written content as well. You want to measure your CAC, customer acquisition cost. You want to measure your customers' lifetime value to actually know if whatever strategy you're employing is sustainable. I'm actually making a profit from this. Channel market fit. I don't know. I think I kind of just invented this term, and maybe it's actually a term, but not all products work on all channels. Some channels like YouTube and TikTok might only work for certain products, while other products might do better on X or LinkedIn. And of course, you want to be able to master all of these platforms. And I think in most cases, you can find a way to advertise your product across these platforms. But you might have to be more creative in some of these cases to get it to actually work. And then also don't ignore distribution. Here I've said that product is half and distribution is the other half. And I think I kind of took this kind of quote from ChatGPT or something, but it's very true that when you're building a consumer brand, you want to be able to think about distribution before you even build the product, in my opinion. Because when you're building the product, you need to make sure, in some sense, if it's a consumer thing, that it goes viral. And of course, Lovable is a very good example of it having this intrinsic virality, because it's just so simple. You just type something and it's visually appealing and it's cool. It's AI. So in some sense, it's viral. And it's easy to market, and word of mouth is very strong with Lovable because of that. In some sense, a lot of revenue is just gained by people talking to each other about the product. So it's this kind of organic growth. Timing compounds. Entering a platform early, like TikTok in 2019 and Reels in 2020, can be very useful, as it can give you kind of an edge on the market. So iterate fast. Small experiments is kind of better than over planning. So just do things quickly, especially if you're a small company. You can do it quickly and it can be very beneficial. Avoid vanity metrics like followers. If you're paying like an influencer, make sure you're just focusing on conversion-driven metrics. Usually like views, engagement, and making sure that the niche is relevant. Here's another one, like one-off campaigns is something which you can do. It's kind of guerrilla marketing, but you want to make sure that you have systems in place to be able to scale things if you're building a large company. And then also copywriting is very important. It's maybe a bit overlooked, but making great scripts and great just copywriting overall is very, very important when it comes to creatives. And then also I talked about this earlier, but if your product is inherently viral, it's very beneficial. So yeah, but that was basically it. I hope this video provided a lot of value, and now you can go out there and market your app and just go viral. I would actually also suggest watching some interviews. So Kalia is a great example. I would say you can do an interview with Kalia founder, and you can see kind of how he marketed his product. And you can do interviews with other consumer apps, which you maybe look up to, and you can see how they marketed their product. Of course, copying directly might actually not work. It probably won't work because your product is going to be different. But you can see how they reason, and you can take inspiration from their strategies. But yeah, bye bye.